That's where I was like, Bennie, come in here.
Come help us out.
I think I know enough about you to need you now.
Airdrop in.
Yeah. So you're managing the pieces. This is your specialty. So what's it like working on Soulstorm then? How many pieces are you trying to fit together here?
Pieces, time zones, continents, a ton. I mean, we have teams that are distributed in Canada, in the UK, in Australia, right? And then we're growing and scaling the production. So there's just more time zones and the physics of all of that to manage.
Is it several different studios you guys are working with?
Yes.
Then?
So our new model was to do it more like film. Right, and we saw, wow, look at this. The engine technology is getting more familiar. There's more people in the world that know how to use Unreal and some other engines. Unity was looking promising. It was early. It took a while for Unity to really look promising, but you were starting to have this sort of democratization of game development where. Like visual effects, if you went to work for Pixar, you were basically spending 3 to 6 months to learn how to use the tools before you were productive at all. The same with Rhythm and Hues, custom renderers, custom modelers, custom compositors. Everyone did everything different, no standardization.
Right.
Royal pain in the ass, kind of like the game industry.
Yeah.
And so film had done this, and then you started having outsourcing. You started having service companies, 2 visual effects companies. But before that, a visual effects company usually did it all itself because it had to, because everything was so hybrid. But the world was changing. And so in that, we said, look, what's one of the biggest things that happens to a developer in the business that people don't really talk about? Your overhead is leveraged against you on every deal. Unless you're really the shit, man. You got to be like the sparkling turd, right? Like you need to be like the bomb.
Yeah.
And then they're like, we'll give them whatever, right? But, and that happens occasionally, and, good for those people that have done that. I've never quite been exactly in that seat. I've had happy people, but not that happy people.
You've been shiny from time to time.
A couple of shines.
You're a turd every once in a while, we promise.
Like in The Shining. Yeah. But, so what happens in the game business, this is just capitalism, right? Is if you're doing a deal and they know you're burning $1 million a month and they know you're getting closer and closer and closer, they're going to try and draw it out as long as possible so that you need the money more and more and more because you're going to be spending your own money you have in a bank. Now, if you have a burn rate of $1 million a month like we had, and that's feeding about 80 people, today it'd be a little more expensive. If you're burning $1 million a month, they just need to hold you up 2 months. That's $2 million that you've pissed out, just keeping people alive, still trying to get them to be productive on the next deal. Well, I won't name names. Various publishers understand that very well, the same way a bank does, the same way an insurance company does, the same way a Hollywood studio does. And they're going to take advantage of that all the way. So we said, how do we get out of that model where we're not a big thing, where we're a small thing, more like how films get made, not big studio films, but like independent films. So what happens? You got a core team, a director, a producer, a writer is usually right at the helm, and then they're going to see if they can get a budget. And if they can get the budget, then they'll bring in contractors to fill out the team. And then when the job's over, it's over.
Yeah.
Right? And then if you have the means to roll right into another and you want to keep those relationships going, great. And if you don't, you're not committed to it. And with the relationships we like, we try to keep them rolling. But in that model, that's how we're doing it now. So we scale. We're never at one solid state of personnel. We scale up and down and in and out depending on where we need it, and we find groups around the world. This is one of the wonderful things that I think happened because of self-publishing, right? Is that with self-publishing, more guys that were fed up with working with the big publishers said, we have a chance to make something small, and if we can go make that, I'm thinking of the game. What was the little puzzle game where you're walking upside down?
Monument Valley?
Yes.
Okay.
That was a great example.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry for my lame memory on this. But that was a great example. Those guys had experience, but they chose to just go for it because they could self-publish it. Right? And as a result, they had tremendous success. More success than they ever had working with publishers. Right? And that possibility became happening. And it started with Steam. you know, and then Sony in the last few years that really ramped up, and then Sony allowed it, and then Microsoft got forced into allowing it.
Yeah.
You know,
It seems like weren't you guys co-developing it with, was it Freema? Isn't that the development studio back in the day?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
They were one of the studios involved. Yeah.
Okay, are they still involved? Or?
They're not on the team anymore.
Okay,
No.
it just shifted around.
Yeah, it just shifted around things.
And I think last time we talked, which you were on this podcast like 3 years ago talking about, I think you guys were talking about like, hey, we kind of want to do like half the development in-house. Is that still the case?
So and what is in-house?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So what we decided was going to one studio to try and do it all is a mistake. Not managing all the data yourself in the cloud is a mistake. And when you hand over too much, I mean, it's really more of a publisher's problem in this model, right? Like they give all the job to a studio, and now they got to police the studio and make sure it gets done unless it's an exceptional studio. But at the end of the day, that studio kind of has the lock on the project. And that's not necessarily the wisest way, and not like we encountered baggage or train wrecks, but it just became clear, you know, some would phase on, some would phase off, and we figured out the details, Bennie in particular, of how to make that transitions more smooth for groups coming on, groups coming off. And that meant you really had to have cloud set up really smart. All your development tools, all your tracking tools, all your communication tools had to be capable, multi-device, anywhere on the fly. I can direct most of the job on the iPhone today, you know, no matter what part of the country I'm working with.
Do you feel like, Benny, this is a good route for the future? For
Absolutely.
future games you guys work on? Is just to
Absolutely.
keep this dynamic rolling system?
Yeah, and I think it's a good hedge for all of the risks that's associated with building games, right? Where if you just had one studio that was doing all aspects of production, you might run into a problem. Like they may find a more lucrative gig and just decide, hey, guess what? We're moving on to the next whatever and leave your project behind, and now you're stuck in a lurch. But by having it so distributed and out there, in order to be able to work with teams of engineers in Australia, or to have creatives in the UK and then distribute all through the US, it's a challenge in figuring out when to sleep, right? It's a challenge on that level, because I'm up, a day in my life is, generally 6 a.m. in the morning-ish. I start my process, right? Getting online with the guys in the UK, that rolls through the day. Then we have our dailies process at around 10:30ish, and that's at HQ in Emeryville. And then after that, as our day winds to a sunset, then we pick up on the Australian team, right? And then we follow through the night in with them. So it's kind of chasing the sun in a 24-hour cycle. Right?
Are they all working on like different levels then, or how are they?
Well, different aspects of different pieces, right? Lots of moving pieces. So some are programmers, some are designers, some are artists. You know, and so you go, I mean, imagine a day where you're communicating, I'll go a little broader, right?
Sure.
You're communicating with Vancouver, San Francisco, we're in Emeryville, you know, but San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, and we start moving west, right? We get into occasionally Toronto, then we're into Quebec, Washington, D.C., Scotland, Ireland, England, different centers, then going more east, then you wind up in Australia, right? So if you look at those time zones, to Benny's point, it's pretty tiring. You know, it's tough. And so you're trying to synergize, like, okay, what are you doing overnight so he's going to pick up on it in the morning? Is the rigger who's working is the rigger who's doing something in Quebec going to get the thing that the animator needs in the morning in San Diego?
Yeah.
Right.
This sounds bizarre. Oh, go for it.
I was just going to say, and you asked me a key question. Do you see it as a model for the future, right? And I think because I've worn the different hats over my career, right, it's something that is in my wheelhouse to do, but I don't think it's for everybody, right? Like, unless you have been a rigger or an animator, or you've dealt with technical issues ranging from implementation to engineering, it's like all of those things are kind of required in the way we do development in order for you to actually be successful at it.
Right.
So you got to be crazy.
Yeah, pretty much.
You gotta be crazy. Okay,
on a day-to-day
gotta be
basis,
crazy.
yeah.
Has the vision for Soulstorm changed? Because we were on the podcast 3 years ago. It was pitched as like, we're using elements from Exodus and pulling it into this, and we're reworking the script and expanding on it. Because I think you said that game was made in 9 months or some crazy rush job originally.
It was just crazy.
So is it still that basic idea, or has it gotten further away from Exodus?
Further away.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, so A number of reasons. So, one, when we started the project, we had a limited set of funds, and we were looking at, okay, how do we do this again? And New and Tasty, we decided to remake New and Tasty because it was that it embodied the image of the first part of the 5-part epic that we called the Quintology.
Yeah.
It embodied it. But Exodus got off track right away, which is why we called it a bonus game. And the publisher was like, yeah, and that'll be Quintology 2. You'll deliver it in 9 months. And I was like, no, you just the story, man. It's bleeding in the street. We're not calling that the Plint. It's a bonus game, you know? And it was really like that. It was like, they're like, but what do you mean? It's part 2. And I'm like, not in 9 months, motherfuckers, you know? Jesus Christ. And it was like really brutal. Sorry, you're going to be bleeping me out.
You're
okay, okay. But now you're getting a real deal, right? Benny, what the is that? Okay.
Jim's calling me right now.
Yeah. Have him wired down. The Jets go. So what happened with that, we called it a bonus game because I took elements that were from the real story of the Quintology, and then I tried to kind of hack together a version of it that I could get a game out in 9 months.
Right.
And that was the easiest way, quite frankly. And this is, you do these things. You borrow millions of dollars from corporations. You better come through, you know, or else you're not going to do it again. You know, that's for sure. And so you try and work with your partners. You try and do different things. You make different choices, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. You live with the consequences. But
so are you trying to make Soulstorm basically something that would fit the Quintology at this point then?
Well, so the idea was when we started, we go, look, let's make Soulstorm part 2 of the Quintology like it should have been.
Right.
Yeah.
Which means Exodus has some things that you will be reminiscent in Soulstorm, but it is not Exodus.
Yeah.
It is not Exodus. It's a brand new game.
And how has it shifted since then? Just fewer elements are being pulled from
Well,
Exodus?
no, it just got bigger, right? So what happened was like some of the sales got better. So we fund ourselves now. And which really means the gamer funds us now. But not ahead of time by buying our games.
Yeah.
And now with digital distribution and self-publishing, we get to retain 70% of every penny spent on those games. And for us, because we love making games, we don't just keep the money. We're fueling it in. And we find that we can make smarter decisions if we work on our own. That's really the essence of it. And if we pay for it ourselves, which makes your stress level like 90 times more. But in doing that, we were looking at the project, and at first we thought it was at first we thought we'd change the story and we'd share some assets and stuff like this. But then it was like, brew is at the heart of this story. Brew. And it was, you know, brew was in the other story, but not the way it was meant to be, right? So this is what I want to tell people who enjoyed Exodus and loved it. I'm thrilled that you loved it. This is not Exodus. Don't compare it. Don't think it's going to be. This is a brand new game. And it has a lot that's going on that Exodus did not. And so we're looking at this, and one of the first things Bennie and I are like, well, what's going to make this game different? And we're going to evolve on the tool set that we created for New and Tasty, which is running on Unity in a 2.5D. Where do we want to push this? And we said, well, it's got to start with the brew, because the original concept was that the brew, aside from the diabolical purpose, secret mystery of the brew was highly flammable. See, that was the thing. That was a thing, right? And as a highly flammable consumer product, you should be able to do with that, like burn down, right?
Yeah.
Like
burn
spread,
everything.
like burn it down, man.
So just adding more gameplay systems like that were originally kind of hinted at.
Now, but this time we're going, if we had a team of 80 people, we don't have a lot of time to explore.
Yeah.
Right? So what we wanted to do is, I don't know if you ever saw Mark Cerny's, it was the second talk at DICE. Mark Cerny did this talk, who I think's a genius, you know, but he gave this talk, it's called Game Design Documents Should Never Be More Than 5 pages. Right. And I thought he was always right. Like you get the things working, then you get them working better, then you build off of that. You know, you might have an idea where your story's going, but really you got to find sweet spots, and you're not going to articulate it as a big plan. Big plans turn typically turn into big turds, right? And unless you know that, well, this is Call of Duty 9, and then this time we're just going to add a dog, and then it's going to be able to parachute, and we're going to add these new features, and we know these extra social features, and you'll be able to share it to Facebook too, right? Like, whatever. Like, you know exactly where that game's going. Like, if you f up the next version of Gran Turismo, you're an idiot, man. Like, how can you have that much momentum? Now, they haven't yet. But you really have to be a f up, right? Because it's there. You just need a, prettier and it's
more
there.
cars.
New and tasty.
A few new tracks, like, some new highlights, whatever. Sparkly paint jobs, I don't know. But the game is there. You'd really have to be an idiot to screw it up. It happens. But for us, we were looking at it and we go, we need to start with brew. And so we're now in the experimental stage, right?
This guy's just crazy all the time because in the experimental stage. So no, it's okay. In the so coming from a more technical background, when I hear some of his ideas, as grand as they are, I have no idea in the moment how we're going to pull it off, right? But I just go with it with a little faith that we'll figure it out together.
So the conclusion is there's just a lot more starting things on fire in Soulstorm than there was originally?
That's not the conclusion. That's just
That's the
base
starting.
reality.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Okay, got it.
But the development of it goes like this, right? I'm like, he's like, it's not going to work. I was like, look, I had an idea of how to make this work technically back on PSX.
Yeah.
Thank God I didn't try to do it because it just would have just taxed the system into like emergency brake mode, and overheat chips. But so we started playing, and we're at Freeman. We're playing, and we're looking at how flammable liquid works, right? Like I can spray the whole room, but then I can drop a match over here and watch it. Watch that blue flame cover and watch where there's more brew on the floor, there should be higher flames. And where there's less, it should be burning out and going away. So like behaving like fire. Not like what we see mostly in games where we see fire visual effects that are canned and not organic and not alive, but I wanted like live
good
fire.
Systemic fire. Okay.
Real good fire, right?
Yeah.
So we start getting that to work, right? And we're like, bam, throwing brew all over, smash. Abe's throwing brew, and then just like throwing a spark. Oh, it's awesome, And we're like, awesome. And then we're like, well, what good's a game where you got a lot of fire and you can't burn down, right? So that
let's throw in like 2 metric tons of physics on top of it. Yeah.
So it's a very physicsy game now. And this is why it's been a long time in development, is just adding more and more physics?
It's one of the reasons.
One of the reasons. Are there other big beats that you guys have changed a lot that have really slowed down the development?
Oh, well, I would say we took a look at the fidelity of the product, how far we wanted to push it, right?
Yeah.
Even from cinematics to what's in game. Everything has just been leveled up. So it's when I look at New and Tasty and I play it today, I remember, so my first game that I worked on was New and Tasty with Oddworld, and it was a great game for its time, but now it's hard to play given how agile Abe feels, how fluid he feels, right? So all of the systems, not just visual effects and frame crushing, additions, right? But the whole experience has just been leveled up so it feels more cohesive. It feels modern.
Cool.
So when we're going with that, we're like, okay, he needs to be way more dynamic, way more twitchy and accurate, and way more fluid. And he was pretty stiff and more stiff than we remember. So you get all that running, and you're like, oh, nice. And then you realize, yeah, and now that just revealed all these other stiffnesses.
Yeah.
Right. So
you go down redesign levels and all this stuff.
Yeah, it's like
and redesign core engineering, right? And redesign a lot of systems that weren't necessarily envisioned when New and Tasty or Exodus or any other product came before.
Right,
but it's like to achieve those things, you're in a whole different ballgame of like, well, we need to re-architect a lot of these elements, right?
So are you guys still aiming for 2019? Or what's the...
Yeah, no, we're aiming for 2020.
2020?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you feeling good about it?
Yeah, always.
Here's our dilemma.
Yeah.
So one, the scaling of how that all happened is interesting. You might want to keep on tapping on that bell.
Yeah.
But we're able to build the game at the pace that we make money selling our games. And so,
Interesting.
And so we're not in a position where we can say 100 people next week, right? Because we don't have that type of income flow. So the speed of the development is governed by two things: our ability to be clever and efficient, and how much money we're bringing in through selling the games. That's what's financed Soulstorm. And now that investment is, reaching, of our own, is reaching like 10 million.
Jesus.
So we're in there,
Yeah.
right? And we're going to exceed that, right? And we might be asking for some help, but that's another story. If people want to see the game sooner,
Yeah.
right?
Are you thinking about crowdsourcing then?
It's yes.
Okay.
Yes, in a unique way, and there'll be more details, that we can talk about. But what it leaves us in is this condition where, a lot of the fans are complaining, how long it takes us.
Totally.
They moan a lot about that, and it's kind of fair. But we're stuck in a position where it's got to be great. If it's not great, we're done, right? You can't do it the way we're doing it. Spend all your money on a title and then have it suck, right?
Yeah.
But you made the date. What do you mean? But we got it out for you on September. It sucked. You're
Right.
dead. I hate you. I'd rather be like, yeah, man, you wanted it sooner. And then we're like, well, but it's great.
Yeah.
We forgive you. So forgive us rather than hate us.
And I gotta say, like, as much as I call things crazy or we're over the top, I really wouldn't do it any other way, right?
Yeah.
Because I've done it the other way, right? Many, many times where you're like, well, here's the date. This is what we have to ship. Let's just try and fix as many of the A bugs as we can
Right,
before we
right.
let the game out the door. But I think with how we do it, it's extremely reactive and responsive, where we just, if there's an idea, right? Sometimes I'll crash in the middle of the office, like I'll just sleep somewhere, come back and go, I think I figured out how we can execute that, right? Let's just group on those ideas and see what comes out of it. And we'll do these sessions like in 60 seconds, let's solve the problem, right? And we'll have the team right there in real time solving those problems. And in every single case, and I wasn't a believer initially, but in every case, when it's like in 60 seconds, we come up with a solution that prior to that, everybody was like, yeah, we're not sure if it can be done, right? And it just goes to show you how if you just put a little mind power to it, in a minute or less, right, you can solve a lot of these issues.
Yeah, sure.